Well, good morning, good evening, or good afternoon. Whichever time you choose to watch this podcast, I want to say I am Dr. Cheryl C. Burks, and I'm your Citizen Engagement Specialist, and it is my honor and my pleasure today to bring to you some people that I know you would want to hear from. Because one of the things that I do in this community, I try to bring information and have it explained in such a way that average Joe Q public or Jane Q public will understand what it is that's going on when it comes to the quality of life and different services that we perform in Spalding County. But the one thing that none of us like to hear sometimes is tax time, or the bills are coming, or my assessment, all the things that we say, ugh. But it's something that we have and that we need, and we also need to understand. So today I have with me two wonderful people that I've got an opportunity to know over this past year that I've been here, and that is Mr. Robbie Williams, who is our Chief Appraiser, and we have Ms. Sylvia Hollums, who is our Tax Commissioner. So before we get into the meat of all of that kind of stuff, how about I just ask you, Miss Sylvia, since you are the lady of the bunch. I'm a lady too, but I can't talk to myself. I want to talk to you. Yes, ma'am. Just tell me a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, I'm originally from Gwinnett County, but when my husband, who was in the Air Force for 21 years, when he retired, we moved down here to Griffin for one reason, because my family moved down here to Griffin from Gwinnett County before that time. So that was the perfect place for us to come be close to them and the rest of my family. And that was, like I said, back in '88. And my degree's in music education. That's why I'm the tax commissioner. Okay. No.
Makes sense to me, yeah.
Right, yeah. I'm also a fire director, so that's the other thing to do. But when I came and so forth, okay. Started working in the office in February of 1989, as a matter of fact, for the previous tax commissioner, Miss Jenny Mullins. And it worked there. And then when she decided to retire, she talked me into running for the job, and I started in 1993, and I've been doing it ever since. I just finished 32 years, so I'm in my 33rd year.
So something's key. You ran for office,
Yes.
and you were elected.
Yes.
So that means that you're a constitutional officer?
Correct.
All right.
I'm one of the 4 constitutional officers, the sheriff, the clerk of probate court, and the clerk of superior court. I'm in the probate judge, excuse me, and the clerk of superior court and myself are the only constitutional officers in the Georgia Constitution, elected by the public, obviously. So.
See, I told you, you're going to learn something every day. So again, thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you.
And Mr. Williams, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born and raised here in Griffin. My family was born here. I've lived here all my life. After I finished school, I had jobs, in different places. I worked in New York, I worked in California and Canada. But Griffin's my home. Like I say, I was born and raised here in Griffin. Always maintained my residence here in Griffin. I started working with the tax assessor's office here in Spalding County back in 2016.
Okay.
Worked here a couple of years. I worked in Fayette County for a number of years, and then I've been back in Spalding County for about 5 years now. So I'm now in the position, like you said, of Chief Appraiser, but a lot of people come in and they'll say, oh, I've been in Griffin for 30 years. And I say, well, I've been here twice that long. So, but yeah, I was born and raised here, so I've always maintained my residence here in Griffin.
Well, see, what that tells me, because each of you have been here for a minute.
Right.
It's not, you're novice at this. You've been doing this a while. You have been working with taxes, you've been working with assessment office. All of that's for a while, so that means that you kind of really should know your stuff.
I know a lot about Griffin.
You know a lot about Griffin, not so much about
Griffin.
that, but you understand the community that you're dealing with.
Exactly.
And so having said that, I'm glad we talked about that, because it's not someone coming from outside of the community, but it's someone that's homegrown.
Yes.
In a sense, you've been here long enough, you're homegrown.
I consider this my hometown now, since I've been here for 35
Well,
years.
I'm the same way. I've been here since 1986.
Right.
So I kind of feel like, I've made it. I'm a Griffinite. But having the reason I'm saying that in that way, that means that you have a clear understanding of what it is that your job does and provide for
try.
the county. No,
We try.
I'm just
We're
saying.
not perfect.
Now, you didn't really know what you were doing when you've been elected in how many years?
I just finished 32 years.
Exactly. So that's my point.
Yeah.
So having said all of that, I wanted to make sure that they saw the experience, they saw the knowledge, and they saw the compassion. Because it's not like you don't live here and you don't get the same letters from yourself that you send out to everybody else. If you think about it, you don't just pick your house up and say, "Ooh, we're moving for right now." But that everything that the average Joe Q public, I like to say that we experience, you experience, but you're the one that having to send that out to the rest of us by nature of your occupation. Okay, so having said that, the first question, Ms. Sylvia, I'm going to ask to you is what is the duties of a tax commissioner?
Well, obviously, it's to do the billing and collecting of property taxes, but I also serve as an agent for the State Revenue Commissioner to handle motor vehicles and the titling and registration of tags and cars and tags and everything. That is also my responsibility.
So every year we have to go get that little sticker. and
Right,
put on.
get that little sticker every year. That's right. Yeah.
That's your office too?
That's right. We have to give. Oh, that's what we do. We issue the decals and so
Okay.
forth. And that's my main thing is to do the billing and collecting and setting up the digest and submitting the digest to the state for approval. Blah blah blah. All that kind of
Okay,
stuff.
we're gonna get
Okay.
the blah, blah, blah in a minute.
Okay,
But
okay.
no, I'm just saying, we ain't gonna blah,
Exactly.
blah, we're gonna put some understanding on
There
that
you
blah,
go.
blah, so I
Sounds good.
appreciate that. But I just
Okay.
wanted them to get the gist of what a
Right.
tax commissioner really does. Okay, now same question for you, Robbie. What do you actually do?
Well, the assessor's office, we're charged to basically define the fair market value of properties. And that's what we're charged to do. We don't do taxes. We basically, our job is to determine the fair market value, what your property would sell for if it was exposed to the open market. Georgia is basically, the taxes are ad valorem taxes, or ad valorem meaning according to value.
According
So
to
your
value.
taxes are going to be representative based on the value of your property.
Of my particular property.
Yes.
Does my community have anything to do with
It
those?
does. There's a
Okay.
lot of factors that come into play, but the basic things we're charged with is, like I say, determining the fair market value of your property, what your property would sell for if you decided, I'm gonna put it on the market, this is what I would expect to get.
So that's residential and
We do
commercial?
residential, commercial, and also personal property.
Yes,
Personal
me too.
property is airplanes,
Boats.
boats, and inventory of manufacturing facilities. So we have one person in our office, her specific duties are personal property, which is assets of a business. If you walk into a Dairy Queen, for example, the chairs, all of the equipment, all of those things that they could pick up and move with them if they decided to relocate, all of that is personal property.
Oh, wow. So how many properties, including all that we have? that you can
Counties,
say
most
county-wise?
counties are measured based on their number of parcels.
Partials, okay.
So a larger county is going to have more parcels. Spalding has just about 33,500 parcels in the state, in the county.
In the county?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And
That's
that's,
really
you think about, there's a lot of parcels that are quarter acres, or there's some that are hundreds of acres.
But
So
the fair market value is what you're focusing on.
what we're looking for is the notice of assessment that you receive should indicate your fair market value of your property.
Okay. All right. Well, Ms. Sylvia, kind of asking you the same question in a sense. What actually, when you say collecting taxes, how is?
Well, the first thing is putting together what's called the digest.
Okay.
And that is a compilation of all the information that's provided by the tax assessors each year. And that until I get that from them, I can't do anything with the billing or anything until we get that information from them. That's what he will be sending it to me pretty soon. And because of our computer system and everything, we're able to process it pretty quickly, thanks to thanks to the computers. But when I get those values and everything's put together, plus the homestead exemptions and everything, or any other kind of exemption, conservation or whatever might apply. Once I get all that information and it's put together in what's called consolidation sheets, and that puts together all the information, particularly by district, so that the county knows how much value they have in the countywide portion. And then the city of Griffin, I collect for them too, so I do the city of Griffin values and so forth, and the consolidation sheets, and the city of Orchard Hill, and the fire district for the county, and also then the Griffin Spalding County school system. We have to provide information to them, and for them they have to set the millage rates before we know what what the taxes are going to be. We have to have those millage rates. So we will get the values from them, and then we put them together in consolidation sheets. I provide that information to each of those entities, and then their boards get together, and I'm sure people know about public hearings and everything that they must have before they can set a millage rate. And once they do that, set their millage rates, and they give that final information to me. That's called the levy. Once I get the final levy, then we calculate, we can start calculating things. But the main thing is the state still has to approve what we've done.
Okay, so stay there for 1 minute with me.
Sure.
Because there's two things I want to ask you questions about that I think are key. You said homestead exemption.
Right.
Talk to me a minute
Okay,
about
homestead, sure. Well, there's a homestead exemption. There's some that are statewide that particular. Usually you see one that starts with an S. That's usually a state exemption. But most counties, I think almost all of them have what's called local homestead exemptions that have been voted on by the public and approved by the public for different types of homestead exemptions. And that is for the property that's owned by and is your primary residence. If you own 5 properties, you can only claim homestead on the one that you occupy as your primary residence. And some people might have it in different counties, and they think they can get one in the other county. No, only one place can you get a homestead exemption. And so that's one. I take those applications too, but and then once I get the applications, I send them to the tax assessors, and the Board of Assessors has to do the final approval of all of those. But we have local exemptions that have been set up, and some based on age and income, some based on, particularly the school portion, there's one based on age only, that they can get exemption at 65, 70, and 75 and
So
older.
there are different exemptions
Different
these age
exemptions,
groups can
right.
get. Okay.
So it can be a complicated thing to put together because the tax bill is going to show the county, the school, and just say the fire. We're talking about just unincorporated, which would be the county, the school, and fire district.
Okay.
Well, there will be a different millage rate for the county, a different millage rate for the school, and a different millage rate for fire district. So all of those have to be put together.
In order to come up with the one for that particular property.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Cool.
That the total for that particular property, and then it's broken down for each one. So that's how they determine get the millage rates, and all that has to be put together.
Okay.
It isn't a simple process, but thanks to computers, it's a lot simpler
It's a
than
lot
it used to be.
simpler.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Anything else you want to add about homestead?
No, homesteads, I mean, it's really helpful if you are able to maximize the homestead that you're entitled to.
Right.
And like Sylvia said, that's going to be based on your age, your income, and those kind of things. And used to, the deadline always for homestead application has been January 1st until April 1st. But with some of the new changes in the laws, they've reopened that.
That's right. Yeah.
That people can come in now during the appeal period.
Exactly.
And maybe you forgot, or your birthday came and you didn't realize you could go to a higher homestead. People can now come into Sylvia's office and reapply for a possibly better homestead.
Well, one of the things I like to point out, especially those that are by age, there's no way we can keep up for when you turn 70. So just
Man,
because you
can't.
signed up for 65, I'm going to tell you, well, maybe that way.
Yeah, no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Go ahead. No.
No, I'm 78. Hold on. Anyway, but so, there's no way we can do it. So you have to be, you're responsible for making sure.
that.
Have to self-report that I'm 70. I'm 70 on January the 1st. You can't turn 70 on January 2nd and get it this year. You had to have been that age on January 1st, any year, any that applies. And as he said, this year it's been opened up so you can come back again, and maybe you found out I didn't apply at all, or I applied for the wrong one, or something has changed that I need to file for a different one. In the past, you could not, until this year, you couldn't have done that.
So what documents do they have to bring about saying that I'm
If
80 and I need to prove to you that I'm 80?
Well, the driver's license is going to show.
License, okay.
Anything that's got any kind of ID like that shows your birthday's fine. But the other thing though is if it's based on income as well, then we need you to bring in your income tax return from the previous year.
Okay. So
Or the state
ID
anything.
or tax return.
Right. tax
Okay.
returns. Or if you don't have to file for some reason, but do have a social security statement or retirement statement or whatever, you have to bring those in and to verify your income. And something else I would like to point out, that some people think that once they apply, that's it, and it's kind of been in that way in a way, but I've looked back on the laws and everything, and actually, we can require them to come in every year and update the income. But any of those local exemptions all say, though, that if any circumstances change, it's up to the property owner to let us know. That maybe they don't, they're moving to a different place and they'll get homestead another place, or they're ready to get a different one or something. They have to come in and prove that income. We can ask them every year, but we don't necessarily have to do that.
So is there a penalty if they
No.
don't? Okay.
They
So they just need to come in,
Right.
update the information.
Right, update the information. Now, they might, if they can't still qualify for the one they get, they at least get the regular S1 exemption. They're not gonna totally lose an exemption based on that, as long as that's still their
So
primary residence.
S1 exemption is just the
Statewide,
basic.
that's the basic, the
Statewide,
basic one,
okay.
right, yeah.
All right, Robbie, this question is for you.
Mhm.
How does your office go about establishing the value of the properties in the county?
Well, first off, values are established as of January 1st. So whatever the condition or the status of your property was, if you were the owner, not the owner, those kind of things, the date of taxation in Georgia is January 1st. So that's what we look at, is what was the status or the condition of that property on January 1st. We look at different things. Our office is what we consider, we do mass appraisal, meaning that, like I said, there's 33,000 properties in Spalding County. We don't look at every house every year. We do what's called mass appraisal. And by using the mass appraisal system, we have statistics from the Department of Revenue that we have to follow. The Department of Revenue constantly is auditing our work to make sure we're complying. But because of this mass appraisal, that's different than a fee appraisal. If you were going to buy a house and the bank may require you to get an appraisal, that would be a fee appraisal. That's an appraisal on one property. Like I said, there's over 33,000. What we do is mass appraisals. And because we do mass appraisals, that's the reason that we have the appeal process, which is a very big part of what we do.
And I can tell you when the appeals process is through July 28th.
That's correct. That's
Okay.
correct.
Yeah.
So, but that's one of the main things, is that there is an appeal process. If you look at your notice of assessment that you would have received in the mail, the biggest thing you can do is compare this year's value to last year's value. Don't look so much at the taxes, because that changed this year. But the main thing is, look at that, look at your value, and if you think there's something wrong with that value, you need to come in and fill out an appeal form.
Okay.
So, and
It's
there's
just that
multiple
simple.
ways to do that. You can file that appeal. You can actually go online
Okay.
to the Spalding County Q Public webpage. You can fill out one there. You can print out the form. You can come into our office and we'll give you a form. You can fill it out there, bring it back later. There's multiple ways, but the main thing is that the appeal deadline is July the 28th. So when we close our office at 4:30 on July 28th, that's the cutoff
it.
for appeals.
And also for signing up for homestead exemption, the same thing on the 28th as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that 28th date is very important.
Yes.
Sure
So
28th.
whatever you're talking about, whatever you're going through, whatever has to happen with your property, with your assessment, the assessment of your property value. Did I say that wrong? I can say things backwards.
Assessment of your property value.
Okay, cool thing.
Yep.
Yeah, because I can say things backwards and everything. So y'all are teaching me, but I want to make sure that the public also
Definitely.
understand. Because if I understand, because that's why I wanted you to make sure that homestead to
Right.
understand what is that, how many we have,
Sure.
and then the mass appraisal. I never even
Yeah.
heard of that. So you're
Yeah.
educating us, and as you're educating me, you're educating them as well. Okay, so we got to move on to another question that I have for you, Miss Sylvia. What are the options that they can pay?
To pay. Well, of course, we take cash, check, credit cards. We can take those as well. And that's pretty much what at first we were not taking credit cards, but we've been doing that for many years now. You still have to be cash or check, but that's the payments that we take right now. I'll point out something about this. A lot of people have mortgage companies that pay their property taxes. They have an escrow account set up for them. They pay their property taxes, and one of the things I really would like to point this out right now. we don't send that information to the mortgage companies. There's no way we can keep up with everybody's mortgage companies and know who to send what bill to and everything. So that's up to the property owner. However, many of them use some services that will come basically get the whole digest. And they'll do this for the mortgage companies who will send them the parcel ID or whatever of the property they want in what county, and that company will give them, this is how much the taxes are. We have one particular company called CoreLogic, and this past year they paid over 8,000 property tax bills for about $27 million. And so we get one big payment from them, and that's very nice. That's a very good way to, if you have an escrow account, we get it done. And my computer software now is so good, it processes it in 15 minutes. So I've been amazed with that. That's been great. But that is something to keep in mind. We do not notify. If anything, there's no way we can keep up with that mortgage company. So they can sell your mortgage to somebody else.
Okay, well, man, that's great to know. But let's go back to something. You just mailed out something. You mailed out something. I'm saying something, but you're going to tell us what it is,
Yes.
and then how that all taxed, and then also something that's on there that
Okay.
people need to look at.
Yeah,
Exactly.
so
Okay, thank
we mailed out the annual, what's called a notice of assessment. And the notice of assessment basically is telling you that for this year, this is your assessed value of your property.
The assessed value of my home.
Yes, and it will have on there a comparison of last year's property value. So what you need to do is you've got your notice of assessment. If some reason you haven't, those were mailed out on the 12th of June.
Okay, so if you hadn't received it by the 12th.
Some people experience issues with the Postal Service occasionally. But there's, we sent out, and there was an article in the newspaper that they had been mailed out. We've put notices on the boards of the county. It was on
I
the
placed it on
InSpalding
social media,
Facebook.
yeah.
Exactly.
We try to get the word out as much as we can that the notices are there. If you haven't received your notice by now, you can reach out to our office. You can actually go to the Q Public website and get your value. But the main thing is that those notices are there. People have until July 28th to file an appeal. And it's very important that if you decide to file an appeal, that you must do it by that 28th day, because it's one of the few absolute codes in the state of Georgia. If you have not filed an appeal by the deadline, your right to appeal is lost for this year. So those notices are out there, they're in the mail. If you haven't gotten those, if there's anybody that hasn't received theirs, just reach out to our office. We can email you one, you can pick it up, you can look at your value on Q Public. But just don't wait until after July 28th.
So July 29th is a wrap.
No.
Okay,
July
after
28th.
4:30 on the 28th is a
That's-
wrap.
That's true.
Okay.
That's true.
Well, Miss Sylvia, now what they mailed out, what did we see, or either one of you can answer that. You said the assessment value from last year and this year, but there's also a number that's on there that you kind of want to make us understand that it's not.
Absolutely. Okay. In the past, every year in the past, you have seen an estimated tax bill. Estimated tax bill at the bottom, and even at the very top, it'll say, this is not a tax bill. I cannot tell you how many people have tried to get the assessment notice, and when they saw that, they sent that money and tried to pay them, have to send it right back to them. So that you cannot, that doesn't.
It's not a bill, that's up
So
there.
in one way, I was glad they were taking that off because it confused people. I think many people based their decision to file an appeal on what they thought the taxes would be. But the taxes on that assessment notice, the estimated taxes were based on the prior year millage rate, which could go up or down.
For this year, it could go up or down.
Up or down, so that would not necessarily be the same thing. And but this year, because of House Bill 581, it became very, I don't know how to put that in convoluted.
Just say convoluted.
Convoluted.
We're good with
Yes.
that. Just
Yes.
kind of confusing.
It could be very confusing
yeah.
because the county was able to, they put an estimate of what their rollback rate might be. But they don't know for sure what that is until they get the values for
Okay,
it.
question.
Yeah.
Rollback rate, what is that?
Rollback rate is the amount that the
Millage
county
rate.
would have to collect and set the millage back, the rate back to.
Okay.
Right.
In prior years, what you would see, if you lived in the county, your notice of assessment would show your county maintenance and operation, it would show your school tax, and it would have a line item for fire protection. Now this year, the school board chose to use last year's millage rate.
Right.
That's the figure you were
That's the
talking
That's
number
it.
that you see. What you don't see is the county maintenance and operations tax,
Estimated.
and you don't see
Fire.
the fire protection. So in some cases, if you compared it to last year's, you would think, wow, this is only 45% of what it was last year. And you think, oh,
That's
wow,
right.
this is a great tax break. But due to the changes in the law, and it's not Spalding County, it's
It's
every
statewide.
county and state, their forms are going to look different this year.
Okay.
So it's very confusing.
Confusing. Okay, but I want to stay there for a minute because a lot of meetings, well, many meetings that I have been in, and people will begin to talk about the taxes, and you did this, and y'all took this up. Where is the state's role in this?
Well, the legislature is the ones that sets
Exactly,
the
I
laws.
want-
The legislature sets the
They
laws.
said it, yes.
And then once the legislature set the laws, then it's up to the Department of Revenue to take the laws and basically create their own guidelines and qualifications of what we have to do. And that's a state of Georgia form that you
Yes.
received in the mail. That's not a Sylvia and Robbie form. That's
Right,
a
it's
state of Georgia form.
Exactly.
And it has to be exactly as they dictate that
Right.
it should be. And that's the reason it looks so much different is because of the legislative changes this year.
Okay, so that, to me, that's key because sometimes, just in my experience, they will see the faces before them.
Exactly.
The names on the statements and say, you did this and
Yeah.
you did that and you, no, there are two things in the state that happens prior to even it getting down
Yes,
here.
yes.
So that's what I wanted to stress that a minute. So what showed up on the notice that you sent out to us is that one, that information is from the school system.
system.
That's from the school system.
And that's not your taxes.
That is not
That's
your tax
not what
bill.
your taxes are
No.
gonna be?
We even sent out, we included this is like a flyer that we sent out that was in there. And one of the key points is that, you know, these rates are subject to change and the estimate provided will not be your final tax bill.
Because that's just the school system.
Exactly.
That's
So
just-
what else has to, you told us what's, but I just wanna, I'm being devil's advocate
Right,
a
sure.
little bit, emphasizing, what has to happen next? Like what's gonna show up next? You don't have
On the,
to,
on the,
just the title,
on the,
not the,
on the assessment notice?
yes, ma'am.
Well, again, it's whatever, however they were, we had to read through and understand, try to understand how they've written it as well, to do, what it's supposed to do. So what's going in the future, I'm not sure, I guess it'd be the same, they could choose to
Okay.
do it the same way until the legislature, or if the legislature changes, anything that they do.
But we
you know.
take away from this right now, what the notices that we received
Right.
in the mail, that's not your.
That is not my
final
tax bill.
Okay.
That is not my
Okay.
tax
That
bill, it even
assessment
says the
notice,
costing,
the main takeaway from the assessment notice is the value.
the value,
The value.
This is
exactly.
last year's value, this is this year's value. And if you disagree with that, you have an opportunity to appeal that.
Yes, sir.
And then the appeal deadline is the 28th.
Okay.
If that's the main takeaway that I would like to make sure everybody understands, is that the 28th is your deadline to file an appeal.
Okay, so I'm gonna go just a little bit further, because I gave them questions and I wanna make sure, because I asked them what are the things that they've run into over the years that may have caused problems, not only for the office, but for the citizen. And so I wanted to make sure that we cover every question that might come to mind, so that we can say we just wanna make sure everybody's educated about that.
Absolutely.
So my next question to you, Robbie, how are these guidelines established by the Department of Revenue?
Well, like I say, the legislatures are the ones who actually set the laws. And from the laws, it comes down to the Department of Revenue. The Department of Revenue sets up all the guidelines. They set up all the processes. And these are for all 159 counties. They provide all of the training and certification to all the members that are appraisers in the office and those type of things. And then from there, that information is sent to a board of assessors. Spalding County has a board of assessors. Every county has one. And that's who my office reports to, is this board of assessors. So the flow is from the legislature to the Department of Revenue to the board of assessors.
Okay.
And also to the tax commissioner's offices, because they give us our guidelines for how we're to process the digest and the certain forms and everything that have to be completed. And then all of that has to be submitted to the state before we can even think about sending a tax bill out. As a matter of fact, some people say, can I go and make a payment on my tax bill? I say, it's illegal for me to, seriously illegal for me to accept the payment when we don't have a tax bill yet. I cannot just say, oh yeah, I'll sit over here and hold it. No, we don't do
You're right, a
that.
post-dated check.
That's right. I said, no, we don't do that. No, we don't do that.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, so a lot of it is the responsibility of the state, because if I don't have the forms correct, if the boards haven't signed off on things, if they didn't have the hearings, and when they have the hearings, have to be in the newspaper
Yeah.
a week before each hearing, and sometimes they've got to have 3 hearings. So that's enough. They can have 2 on the same day, like 1 in the morning, and one before noon, and 1 after 6 on the same day. To be able, because they got to have 3 hearings. They have the first one, and then the second week, and then wait a week, and they have 2, and then another week to have the final one, the second. And this has happened sometimes if for some reason all the board members can't be there, somebody gets sick or whatever, they have to put it off and have to advertise again, so it makes it
So that process to ensure that we are above board and we're
Right.
following everything that the law tells us to do, we have to make sure that that information is out there in a timely
Absolutely.
manner. Therefore,
Absolutely.
you all are working on a time constraint
Yes.
to
Absolutely.
make sure that all of the citizens are informed about everything that's going on with every step of this process.
That's what we try. We both have a website. They have a website, and we
Yep.
have a website, actually a new one now. I like to tell everybody it's www.spaldingcountytaxga.com. Okay, it's just added the spaldingcountytaxga.com, and go to that website. You can actually look up your property on that, and if you need to see, okay, what was my taxes 2 years ago?
Okay.
So you can look that up. You look up
So
your
that
neighbors too, 'cause
information
it's
is
public
accessible.
information.
It's accessible.
All of that is public information. You can look up, see what your neighbors pay in taxes if you want to be nosy,
Well,
Things like
true,
that.
you
So
can,
do
you can.
that,
Public
so
information.
It's
Okay.
all on there.
That is great. Robbie, I have this other one. How and when are values established?
Well, the basic thing is you need to think about is it's the value as of January the 1st.
January 1st.
January 1st is what we're going to be valuing your property on. It's who owned the property and what was the condition of that property on January the 1st. We have a lot of times people will buy a house January 3rd, but the bill will go to whoever the owner was on January 1st.
Oh, okay.
So that's one of the main things is January 1st is the date of taxation.
May I make a point in that regards to that, because we will be sending that tax bill out to basically now the former owner, whoever owned it January the 1st, because they sold it after January the 1st. That by law is who I have to send the bill to, at the first one. That property could have been sold on the 3rd, and that person on the 3rd could have sold it to somebody else in February, and it could have been sold to a 3rd person. So when it finally gets down to the end, we don't know who might be responsible for the taxes that year. Usually at a closing statement, the attorney will give the buyer the seller's portion of those what estimated taxes that they think that it would be, and be up to the buyer to pay the taxes. Now, may not all set it up that way, but many of them do it. Again, we have no access to that information, so then we have people will say, it's not my tax bill, so they don't pay it, but they were supposed to pay it, and it becomes delinquent. So it is important to keep up with that.
So, Robbie, I'm going to stay here a minute. When you talked to us about mass appraisal and everything,
Yeah.
but what does the growth have to do with anything?
Well,
that
there's
you-
two different kinds of growth. When you look at valuation, there's inflationary growth, which is when a house sells or properties around you are selling for more. That's inflationary growth.
Okay.
If you look at a house, that house may have been valued at $200,000 6 years ago. Well, that same house, because of inflationary growth, because other properties are selling for higher amounts, that's kind of raised the whole.
Inflation, yeah, raise the
Now,
whole
that's
thing.
inflationary growth. Now, real growth is the other thing we have to look at. Real growth is if you build a house on a vacant piece of property, or if you added a room onto your house, or if you added a pool to your property, those kind of things. That's
Okay.
real growth.
Okay.
So we look at both inflationary and real growth when we're looking at establishing the value of your property.
Okay, cool. All right, not last thing, but how can taxpayers, we talked about the appeal process. How can taxpayers file an appeal?
Well, you can come in, like I said, you can come into the office. We'll be happy to print you a form. You can go to the Spalding County Q Public website, and you can fill out the form there and email it to us. You can print out a blank form from the Q Public page. You can fill that out and bring it in. Or like I say, you can come in the office, we'll print one out, you can fill it in there. You can take it back, take it home with you, bring it back later. There's multiple ways to do it.
Okay, all right then. Well, Miss Sylvia, one thing you talked about, what happened with delinquent tax collection?
Okay.
Can you say a little bit about that?
Well, we have a process that if people don't pay the taxes, we have things called tax sales that we can have. When the tax bills go out, you have 60 days to pay. Okay. If you don't pay within 60 days, then late fees start applying. It's 1% per month in interest, and then after 120 days, there's a 5% penalty that's added to that. And not every 120 days after that, there's another 5% penalty added until it reaches 20%, which takes well about a year and a quarter for that to happen. The interest in the meantime goes up 1% per month, which adds a burden to it. If you couldn't pay it to begin with, you want to try to get it.
Try to pay it now.
That's the only way to make it worse. And some people just walked away from things too. But after a certain amount of time, we have to send out a notice. We have to send what's called a second notice and say, because that you have delinquent taxes, and if they're not paid within a certain amount of time, then we will file a tax lien in the Clerk of Superior Court's office. And then once those tax liens are recorded, we can put the parcels together and put them in a non-judicial tax sale. And the difference in that is a non-judicial tax sale that we can have on the first Tuesday of the month. That one is if whoever buys the property at that tax sale, they don't get a clear title to the property. They get what's called a sheriff's deed. Okay, that sheriff's deed that says we paid all the taxes for them. The owner of the property has 12 months to redeem it from them, and the buyer who bought it at the tax sale has to, after 1 year and 1 day, in order to get full clear title, they have to foreclose on the owner's right of redemption, which is another legal process. You don't want to try to, you want to get an attorney to help you with that, I'm sure. You foreclose on their right of redemption, and if they don't keep up with that, and then you can foreclose on it, and then you get a full issue, a deed is issued, and you own the property then.
You know what? That sounds like an entirely different show that we need
Okay.
to do. And when I asked the question, I'm like, whoa, that's a lot, and whoa, people really need to know what's going on. So I'm gonna pull us back.
Okay.
I'm gonna pull us back
That's
into
fine.
this
Okay, that's
assessment of taxes and all
Sure.
of that. But I know we've talked about how the owners get the notices. We put them in the mail, Griffin Daily News, social media. We have different signs and things on the televisions in the hall. But are there any changes at these assessment notices for 2025?
Well, like I said before, the biggest change that you will see is the first part is always as it has been. The middle section is where you're focusing on the value. That's the main thing that we want people to focus on is if you're looking at this, you're appealing your value of your property, not your taxes.
But the
People
value
will
of
come
your
in,
property.
people will come and say, yeah, I'm okay with the value, but the taxes are too high. Well, you know what, that's a different department, a different meeting, those kind of things. But the forms are different this year because of the legislative changes that have taken away the estimated tax, and it's been replaced by the other information that we talked about.
Okay.
So, but the biggest thing for us is to focus on the value. Look at your value, compare it to prior years, and if you're okay with that, there's nothing else you need to do. The next thing you would receive would be your actual tax
Your
bill.
actual tax bill. So what time frame do you think that might be happening?
And
You don't have to give an exact.
no,
What's the time?
in the past, our normal due date has been November 15th. The state exemption deadline is December 30th. However, counties could vote to change it to November 15th if they want, and we did many years ago. However, we have to meet all this process and all the timing and everything. If we can't get it done in a time for the bills to, that means they need to go out by September 15th. And the last 4 years, I would say, especially since COVID, that really kind of threw a
Presented
monkey
a
wrench into
challenge
everything.
for it, yeah.
A big challenge of getting things done on time, and then waiting for the different entities to set their millage rates. I depend on other people to do everything before I can do my job.
Exactly,
It's the way it goes,
because,
you know how that is. Okay. And so once that, so we're hoping for November. We're aiming for it, and so are the boards of commissioners there. We're trying to make sure we get all the millage rates set on time, and I'm going to do my best to get the information to them. We're supposed to submit our digest to the state by September 1st, and for them to approve it. We always do it before then. We can get an extension, which we've had to do the past 2 or 3 years. We can get an extension if we need to, but hopefully, that's not our goal. Our goal is to get the bills out. I hate having a December due date because of people having to pay it at that time of year. I think they'd rather pay it in November, rather than later in the year. So we're striving very hard for that.
Well, I think you all have done an amazing job in explaining things and me asking questions. Now, if I have left it here, have I not covered anything? Is there anything you just want to say to make sure we understand from the assessor's office to the tax commissioner's office?
For me, I mean, I would just say that if you see this and you haven't received your notice of assessment, you need to call us.
Call.
And we can get one in your hand, we can email it to you. I'd rather you come get it than us put it in the post, but we can do that. Look at your value and just remember if you don't agree with it, you need to file an appeal before the 28th.
July 28th.
July
And
28th.
also, if you have not filed for homestead exemption or you want to change it,
Absolutely.
please don't forget. Remember, you can do it during this time. And as far as we know, it's going to be opened up every year like this.
Okay.
So if you miss it January 1st, come in and help us make sure you got the right one, because we want you to have the right exemption. That's what.
Well,
they're
that's the
for.
thing that I pick up from each of you.
Mhm.
It's not hiding anything,
Oh, no.
trying to trip anybody up. It's like this information is out there.
Mm-hmm.
This is how it happens. This is how it occurs. And my office, and your offices are here
Right.
to help,
We'll
to
try.
walk people through it. So I just think that's amazing. You all have helped me so much. One other thing I'm going to say, Miss Lady, you got a kiosk.
I have a
And
kiosk,
Kroger's.
yes, we have a kiosk at Kroger now, just opened up like the last couple of weeks and people are already using it. A kiosk means that and actually, we were participating statewide already, we just didn't have one in our Kroger. But you can go renew your tag at
You can
Kroger.
go renew your
It
tags
isn't
at
available
Kroger.
yet, but it's going to, you're also at some point going to be able to renew your driver's license
Oh,
at the
wow.
kiosk. But I thought it was already open, but it's not yet. They said they're still working on that part. So, but that is wonderful that we have that kiosk out there now. And,
Oh, that's amazing.
especially, we had, as a matter of fact, I'll tell you the story. One of my ladies said she was with some friends on last Saturday, and she said, "Oh, it's my birthday today, and I forgot to get my tag." And my lady told her, said, "Oh, we've got a kiosk at Kroger. You can go get it now." She hugged her neck. She said, "Thanks
See,
so much."
it doesn't take much to
That's
please
right.
us, you know.
That's right.
So
That's
that is
right.
wonderful.
So-
Again, I want to thank y'all for
Thank
coming
you.
in and just taking this time with me and explaining everything not everything, but the things that are pertinent to us, that's important to us, those of us who live in Spalding County, and those of us who work in Spalding County, and those of us who play in Spalding County. I have to put that out there. I have to kind of put that out there. But again, I want to thank you all for joining us as well. If you have any information or any questions that you have about any our taxes or your assessment of your property, please contact Mr. Robbie Williams' office. That's the tax assessor's office. And or either for your taxes,
Right.
contact Ms. Sylvia Holland's office. So
Yes,
again, y'all have a spectacular Spalding Day, and look out for the number of the other people that we're going to be interviewing to make sure you understand how we are here to serve you, to make sure that we have the best quality of life here in Spalding County, where we live, we work, and we play. Have a good day, y'all.